So today we are going to begin the installation of all of our electrical cables so we can get the inverter and the converter hooked up. And so I have the front cleared out, moved all my material, and I'll give you a shot of where we're going to start, and then we'll get some cables crimped, get some power going. So we're going to start here in the front, and I have a couple of distribution or bus bars actually that I'm probably going to be relocating them about right here. I have one for positive and one for negative. Once those are installed, then I can run my ground to my battery and my positive to my battery. And that way I can connect my inverter into the bus bar and my DC converter into the bus bar. This wire here currently is what connects the negative side from one battery to the positive of this battery. They're 6-volt batteries, so when you put them in series like this, that makes 12 volts. I will be upgrading this wire to a 2-aught wire, and I think this, I believe this says it's a number 2, but I'm gonna say it's probably less than that. So this is going to be removed. We'll take it out and reinstall with a heavier gauge wire and make sure that we get plenty of power. So now I have both bus bars installed, and we will also be installing a shut-off switch for the inverter, which will probably go about right here. So the positive from the inverter will connect to our shut-off switch. Positive from the shut-off switch will run into our bus bar, and then we are able to turn things on and off from right here. The next item on our agenda will be our 250 amp NL fuse, and we'll probably mount that about right here. And our positive from our inverter will run to the fuse, and then from the fuse we'll go into our shut-off switch. So let's get that installed. So I removed the converter because I want to test it before we actually get in there and start hooking things up. So I'm going to go ahead and plug this in to our AC. I have my tester here in which we'll test the DC output, which should be somewhere around 13.6 or so. So let me plug this in, we'll hook up our leads, I'll zoom in on our multimeter and check our reading. So our meter is on, and we've got our positive and negative lead, and so I'm going to touch the ground on the negative side and positive on the positive side, and we get a reading of 14.9 volts. So that is the first stage in charging, so it would charge and then go down to a trickle. So we are working. So now with our bus bars in place, we also have our fuses in place. Now we need to start measuring for some wire. So I'll get the cable down there and figure out the lengths that I'm going to need. Then we will begin to crimp for our cables and get this thing hooked up. So our first cable that we're going to run will be from our positive on the inverter, and we'll give ourselves some slack here. And I made a mark right here. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take our cable cutters that I purchased from Harbor Freight, and we're going to make a clean cut. So put that on our mark like so, and give it a nice little chop. Alright. I could probably straighten that up just a little bit more. So that's our first piece. We'll be able to put our connectors on both sides and then connect that and put a clamp on the wall to secure the cable. So now we have the length of the cable that we're going to need for each little component. So like I said, we cut things long so we can have a little room to play, bend wires and get them clamped up. So that's going to be for the inverter. Then from the inverter, or actually from our fuse here to our shutoff will be from right here. And then from our shutoff to our bus bar, we'll have another piece here. Then we also cut our ground cable here. Will run underneath of our fuse block. Then that will come over and tie into our negative bus. So that's the inverter. And then for the converter, we have a short piece that we'll be putting in here. And then we have from the fuse to our positive on our bus bar. And then we also have the negative, which will go from here and will also tie into our bus bar. So now comes the time to start crimping cables. So let me get set up, get my tool, well, calibrator or whatever I want to call it, and we'll go from there. So we're going to be using a YQK70 hydraulic wire crimper. This is the 10 ton model, and we're going to swap out our dies here. So for the 1/0 wire, what we're going to be using is the 50 millimeter die, and for the 2/0 wire we'll be using the 70 millimeter die. So we're going to swap those out, and basically those just pop out just like so. The 50, which are marked or stamped with the numbers, we're going to put those in. Then we will cut our cable back, put our lug on, put it in our hydraulic press here, and crimp it on. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our lug and we're just going to set it here, and we are going to make a mark on our wiring, how far back we want to cut our cable sheath here. We'll cut that, pull that off, and then we'll be able to put our wire on the inside. So to do that, we'll just take our wire cutters, set it on here, and just slowly turn it. And you should be able to feel the wires inside once you get down to them. Here we go. I can feel it. What we don't want to do is cut through our wiring here. And there we go. Just like so. And I did that without cutting any wiring. So the lugs are just flared ever so slightly here on the end, so what we want to do is we want to pinch that and make sure that all of our wiring go in just like so. Push it in as far as we can. There we go. Then we'll crimp that on, and then I'll have to make a store run because I don't have any heat shrink, but that's what we want to do. So let's go ahead and get this crimped. So with our correct dies in place, we have our lug on our wiring, and we've got it pushed in as far as it's going to go. We are going to crimp probably down here on the back side just a little bit. We'll see whether or not I need 2 crimps. But what we're going to do is place this in our tool, go ahead and close it up. Get it nice and tight here. Make sure I got the right die. Alright. Then we will crimp that on. So once everything is in position, closed up, my wiring is pushed in as far as I need it to go, then we will crimp it down. Until it bottoms out. Don't go any farther or you'll split this thing, and then you're really up the creek. So let me take that off. And that's the crimp that it puts on there. And I think it's on there pretty tight. I'm going to go ahead and rotate it and put one more crimp up closer to the top here. There we go. Nice and crimped. And it's on there pretty tight. So we'll heat shrink that, put the lug on the other end, and make sure that we've got the right distance and we can connect that up. So to get the length that I'm going to need on here, I went ahead and put my lug on the inverter, pull my cable back to where I think I'm going to need it, and take my lug here and made a mark right here where I want to cut the cable. Then I'll trim it back and we'll go ahead and install the lug on this side. So let's crimp a lug on our wiring. So I've got a couple done, so I thought, yeah, why not shoot another little piece here. So we're going to take our wiring, set it down, take our lug, set it next to it, mark where I want to cut the sleeve back. Then we will take our handy dandy little wire cutters, put those on here, and just slightly rotate this thing until we feel it coming in contact with wiring. We don't want to cut through the wires. We just want to get it down to the wire. There we go. I can feel it loosen up. Okay. Set that down. Pull off the end here. And then we can take our lug, put that on there, push the wire in real nice like, yes, and then you have writing on your cable, so the best thing to do is go ahead and turn it up so the top of the lug is in line with the writing. So if you ever have to get in there to see what you size cable you need, you'll see it. So now we'll take our crimping tool, and what we're going to do is go ahead and get it down snug onto the lug, snug as a lug. Then we're going to push the wire in, make sure it's in there nice and tight, and then start crimping it down. And then what you want to do is just crimp it to the dies bottom out. If you go any farther, you will break this tool. So don't go too far, just to where it bottoms out. We'll loosen up just a little bit, tighten it back up, slide the lug back a little bit, and make a second crimp. There we go, just like so. Loosen that up, tighten it back up for the next round, set that aside. Now we've got a nice crimp all the way back to our cable, our wire, our jacket here. So it's always a good idea to start your crimp on the back. If you start it on the front, what will happen is it'll pinch that wire and it'll slide out. So start here in the back and then come up for a second crimp. That's good. That's looking good. Alright, so we finished our last crimp, and I switched dies. So I started out with the 50, but and it seemed to work pretty well. And I noticed one of the lugs began to slide off, so I switched over to the 35, began to crimp it down, but I didn't crimp it to where they touched. I just crimped it, and they have a little bit of a wing to it, but it's on there. It's not going anywhere. So now we have some shrink wrap tape or heat shrink, and we are going to set up for our heat shrink, and hopefully I got enough. We'll see. So I'm going to move the heat shrinking bit outside. Drill Master, Harbor Freight, $9. But when you turn it off, this thing smokes worse than a train with hot brakes. So I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So we got a nice shrink on that. I'm going to turn that off. There it goes. Yeah, I don't know what's in there making that smoke, but whew, stunk up my trailer. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and finish putting our heat shrink on all of our cables, and we'll get ready to install. Okay, so we're nearly set up. So I have my cables for my shut-off switch, which will run to the bus bar. Cable for the other side, cable from the inverter to the fuse, and got our ground wire all ready to go, and ground over here. So we still have two more little fittings that we'll be installing on the converter, but we'll get everything else hooked up and run and in place. Then the last thing to do is to run a 2-aught wire to the batteries. So let me start wiring things up. Okay, so this is what we've got done. Let's start over here. So for our inverter, we install our fuse. We ran a line from our fuse to our inverter, from the fuse into our shut-off switch, which runs to our bus bar. The ground is done the same way. We have our ground here on the inverter. It runs around and ties into our bus bar. For the converter, we have our fuse. We have our line from the positive coming to the fuse, from the fuse into our bus bar. And same way with the ground. We have our ground, which runs from the converter, comes to the bus bar. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to check the voltage from the converter before I close everything up here, and hopefully we have the same reading. Okay, so we have the converter plugged in, we have a green light, and we have the voltmeter on. So basically all I need to do is touch the ground here and touch the positive, and I should still come out with about 14 volts or so. There we go, 14.9, same as I had before. Alright, so that is telling me that I have the converter connected up correctly. So we have power from the converter over to our bus bar, and right now the only thing left is to run the 2-aught wire between the batteries, and the 2-aught wire to the positive bus bar, and the 2-aught wire to the negative bus bar. Once we get those connected, then we will have power to the inverter. So I think for this one we'll call that a wrap, and we'll pick up where we left off next time. Alright, well I think we're going to call that a wrap for the day. I thought maybe I'd have the 2-aught wire installed, but a couple little setbacks. I'd realized I didn't have enough parts or something, and I kept having to run to the hardware store and pick things up, so that ate a little chunk of time. And anyway, one of the last things I do have is I bought a couple of battery boxes. So we we'll be putting our batteries in here, feeding our cables out the side, or the ends here. That way they're enclosed, and my buddy Paul will rest easy knowing that when I open up my cabinet, I'm not going to drop something across the terminals and short them out. I do have things somewhat put back in place, and I think we're just going to shut her up for the night, set the wall there, put the lid on, close the cabinet tops, but I won't put the cushions or the table back because I need to get back out here and install the 2/0 cable. So once I get the length that I need from the battery to the terminal blocks on each side, cut that, get the lugs crimped, then I can 2/0 side to side on the batteries there, connect those two so we can get rid of that chintzy little wire. You can see the difference here. This is the wire that I was using compared to this wire here. So it's quite an increase in size. So I'm hoping that works out really well. We'll know when I get everything connected and pull the trigger and test it out. So right now I'm pretty stoked about it. I want to thank everybody for staying tuned. Continue to watch the videos, the comments that you make, and very much appreciated. Hope that you guys find some of this of interest and piques your desire to do these things on your own. So like I've always said, when you get an idea, do it. Don't wait. You'll talk yourself out of it, and then you'll regret that decision later on. So do the things while you can and while you're thinking about them, and the reward is great. So anyway, until next time, stay tuned.